sentimental during dick jokes, I have problems. I know this is something exciting for my personal life. It's one of those truth is stranger than fiction type of things. And like most good stories, it starts someplace far, far away. As I said, this is a story that's stranger than fiction. It's a little personal though. It's about how I've never met my biological father. Now for most of my life I was told that he was dead. Now my mom's logic, she was not being dishonest, because as far as she was concerned, me and my older brother were never going to meet him if she had anything to do with it. And he very well could have been deceased for all she knew because of his devil-may-care approach, his personal philosophy of sorts. I did know a few things though. I knew that he was a Brazilian gringo. My mother met him when she was a teenager. He was 21 years older than her. That's a true story. He was a pilot, and that I also had numerous brothers down in South America that I'd never met before. Not like any young boy, I loved my mother, and I could see that talking about her past sometimes made her uncomfortable. It had the ability to reawaken old pains and regrets too complicated for a child to understand. As a result, I didn't pry for more information despite my curiosity. The bits and pieces I did get from her or other family were usually accompanied by late nights and heavy drinking. Now, as I understand it, my father was quite the character, something out of a Tom Waits song, The Adventures of Baron Munchausen as I saw it. He was a crazy person, to be fair, who somehow broke the confines of fantasy and stood defiant against the world you and I are forced to live in. Now, he grew up in the U.S., but he immigrated to Brazil. Not that there's anything unusual. There's a lot of people who immigrate out of the United States. It's how he got there that stuck out as a legend in my mind as a child, which apparently he had a child with a woman that he no longer wanted to be with. So like any responsible father, he did what he had to do, kidnapped the child, stole a plane, and flew to Brazil where he could not be extradited. I'm telling you, truth stranger than fiction. Now, despite not knowing anyone or speaking Portuguese, he managed to get along, using his quirky boldness and handsome charm. And it's not long before he found a Swiss sugar mama. It's true, he fathered 2 more of my older brothers with her. And he opened up a bar focused on American culture and tourism called Bodega de Bill, in the still new capital of Brasilia. And at this point in his life, that's where he met my mother. The circumstances that led her to Brazil were equally telling of her exuberant idiosyncrasies. As a teen, she decided the path of school and wage slavery just wasn't for her, and instead dropped out of her obligations to hitchhike across the country following her favorite bands. Not so much unlike myself. She was at one of these famous riots that occurred at a sold-out Led Zeppelin concert.
Yeah!
That's right. And she got picked up by the cops after being trampled in a stampede, and as a result, forced to return to her family in Ohio. It's probably needless to say, but her stepfather was less than pleased he had to drive across the country to pick her up. And after returning home, they decided this was the last straw for them, and they sent her to go live with her father. The logic being that if they forced her to go live with him, she wouldn't be able to get into trouble anymore because of the language barrier. He had moved to Brazil as well. It was where he met his second wife while working abroad. Now I'm sure they were surprised to discover that it ended up being the exact opposite effect. You see, because she did not speak Portuguese, they sent her to the English-speaking school in the capital, and she went to school with all the other rich, privileged children of diplomats and ambassadors. Through them, she realized that in Brazil, you can basically do anything you want as long as you're in a position of privilege, power, or wealth. And her friends would do stuff like smoke pot and taunt cops, like on this side of the fence. Be like, we're on the embassy, you can't do shit about it. What are you gonna do, pig? She's my, my type of lady. However, one of the places that they like to hang out when they weren't causing problems was at Bodega de Bill. My biological father used his age and charm to exert a parental-like role, encouraging that she was better and different from the hooligans she liked to hang out with, not being the daughter of a diplomat or an ambassador. At first, he played down his role as a mentor, secretly beginning to obsess over her. The long story short is he used his position and age to slowly seduce and eventually impregnate her for my older brother.
That's me!
And I'm sure a lot of you guys are not particularly comfortable, as I'm not, with the idea of a predatory older man taking advantage of a teenage girl, but things are a little different in Brazil. That's not actually that uncommon, so there's somewhat of a cultural divide. And I do believe that despite all of his craziness, that he loved her in his own way, because using the same reckless irresponsibilities that took him to Brazil to begin with, he decided to abandon his bar and family and start a new life with her in America. Unfortunately, that's where she got to know what he was really like as a person. Isolated from friends and families, he revealed himself to be paranoid, jealous, and occasionally incredibly psychotic. Being unable or willing to function as a regular person, he forced them to live in the back of a pickup truck like gypsies, moving from different campgrounds, finding odd jobs here or there. Now, he knew my mom wanted to leave him because she's not a weak person by nature. She knew that the situation had gotten out of control, but he wouldn't let her ever leave his sight unless me or my brother was with him. He had sacrificed everything to be with her, and he wasn't going to give it up. She did eventually find a way to escape this abusive situation. However, the irony of the situation is it wasn't her own family that came to her rescue, but instead Carla, the Swiss sugar mama from Brazil. She took pity on my mother because she didn't think it was her fault that my father's actions had been what they were, and saw my brother and her as siblings to her own children, and all she saw is that these kids were in need and in a bad situation. So she came to Florida and advised my mother to take the car that she provided, some money, and to get away while she distracted Bill. However, during this attempt, Bill realized something wasn't quite right, and he confronted her in the driveway, blocking her only escape. Now, I'm not sure if I actually remember this moment in my real memory, or if I just picture it from the stories I heard as a youth. But he was blocking her exit, screaming, and my mom had to make a split-second decision because he was capable and fully ready to smash the glass and physically move us from the car if that's what it was going to take. So she slammed on the gas, knocked him out of the way, and made her escape. And I'm sure my life would have been monumentally different if she hadn't showed the courage she had in that moment. After knocking him out of the way, however, she was completely broke, single mother with an infant and another child with no place to really go. For good reason, she was terrified that he would follow her to confront her again. And knowing nowhere else to go, she headed towards Columbus, Ohio to visit her family. And this is one of those moments in the story where truth is stranger than fiction, because as she exhaustedly pulled into town on one of the main boulevards, High Street, if you guys are familiar with Columbus, Ohio, at a glance she saw an old family friend heading south while she was heading north. And they knew that neither of them lived in town anymore, and this wasn't the age of cell phones, so they did what most people would do. They stopped and they pulled around and they met up with each other. And as my mother explained what her circumstances was, this old friend gave her money and said, get some gas, get some food, you're following me, you're coming back up to our house in Wisconsin. He doesn't know you're there. And that's how my family ended up in Wisconsin. And now I'm a proud resident of Milwaukee. This is more or less where I grew up. You may be asking why I'm choosing to share this particular story right now at this moment. This is a spoken word piece I've been working on for almost 3 years, but it's so personal I didn't know if it was like too intense for a Dead Man's Carnival. I'm saving it for a spoken word showcase. But as crazy as it may be, my brother and I are leaving town next week to meet our Brazilian family for the first time ever. The Facebook era may have its shortcomings, and one of the silver linings is it allowed my family an opportunity to bridge old wounds and discover a piece of our heritage. And I hope my brother shares my sentiment that I'm very excited to find out where we really come from.